Today we've got Dr. Ralph Mnguni. We welcome him as a guest to Agenda4Action program, which is part of mtwazireview.com. Dr. Mnguni, welcome to the Agenda4Action program.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you today.
Thank you very much. We've got a number of issues that we need to cover. But first of all, Dr. Mnguni, the question here is specifically on the education issue. And the education issue has been a hot issue, especially in Matebeleland. We've seen a lot of complaints from, the common man on the ground, basically stating that they find access to education or resources for education or access to colleges and universities being very difficult, and also looking at probably the effects of ground and the fact that, or the lack of resources at schools, scientific resources for sciences and stuff like that our kids have not been performing very well, and also the issue of teachers coming into the region and teaching kids at primary level. And recently we've had a situation where grade 4 pupils had to tell their parents in one of the local schools, stating that they had a teacher who didn't know how to communicate in the local language, and they were very concerned about this, understandably. So what's the situation? Because this situation has been allowed to continue as it is for almost 34 years. Every leader or every person who's tried, or any leader who's a few leaders in the mode of Sidney Malunga who've tried to tackle these issues and say, we are very concerned here, people like Welshman Mabena, they've had to be consigned into regionalists, tribalists, unpatriotic people who are not progressive or retrogressive. So how does ZAPU want to deal with this?
As I said, when you asked me first about who I am, and particularly appertaining to my social perspective, I said that my view is libertarian, where people are allowed, or people we have a party that enables people to speak their minds, irrespective of how uncomfortable people actually might find that. Yes, it's quite true that quite a lot of our people in pursuit of power. There are two things here. We've got to look at people that are actually motivated by actually power at all costs. And we're looking at people that say, we want liberty and freedom. And sometimes they go together, sometimes they're incompatible. And what has been happening in Matebeleland is completely unsustainable. And hence our insistence as ZAPU that decisions have got to be devolved. Decisions have got to be taken by people that know exactly the needs that they need to satisfy that particular locality. Now, if this is properly marketed, now it's not actually taken away from anybody. We are saying, okay, in as much as we are together in ZAPU, our colleagues in Maswingo, in Mutare, in whatever, they can make decisions that actually affect them on the ground. And this what you're saying, this painful outcome, this painful issue of children that have had to actually take up that struggle for themselves, it's absolutely painful. It's something very foresighted, because issues like education are what one could refer to as chronic, because the effects of this failure at that level are, its effects might not be felt tomorrow, but they could be really, really the destruction of a nation later on.
Later on. Thank you for that. There have been various groups and various, groups in Matebeleland that have really now are sort of taking the whole issue up front in a major way. It could be, human rights groups pertaining to, Gugrawundi, and other groups and other individual politicians who've raised this issue. Now, this is an issue that really needs urgent attention. So how can this be brought to bear that, there is an increase of intake of students who can become teachers in Matebeleland to address this situation, because they are there. There are loads of students that do qualify to be able to teach, but probably they are finding it very difficult to access the college, universities and stuff like that. How are we going to, at the moment I haven't had a Dr. Dalemo either raising this issue vociferously. I haven't had Professor Ralph Mnguni raising this issue vociferously. I haven't had any other leader from Matebeleland, sort of really raising it, like probably the likes of Welshman, Mabena and Sidney Malunga. There seems to be this fear to raise this out of being scared to be labeled a tribalist. So how do we overcome this?
Thank you for that, Tembani. I don't know if you say raising this issue vociferously what you actually mean. I'll raise my voice actually and say, look, this is unsustainable. When you say, you probably are referring to the fact that these people have heard, but you know exactly what the media in Zimbabwe is like and what they'll pick and actually sort of run with. Now, if given the platform, I'm saying right now that what is happening in Matebeleland, in as much as I would defend the same happening in any other part of Zimbabwe, where people are actually sort of being brought not to add value to that particular area, I'll defend the people there and say this is not sustainable. I referred to earlier on about the resources in Marange, that we cannot go, those resources are a finite resource. At some stage before the people in Marange know exactly what's hit them, their resources will be gone and they'll have nothing to show for it. Now this cannot go, and that is why ZAPU has no time. We really, really want to actually push this agenda of devolution. That's why we made it a flagship. Unfortunately, like what happens sometimes is that there are people that have actually picked that up and run with it. You look at the constitution that has been accepted, which only actually gives sort of devolution a 5% of the national budget. That is way, way below what ZAPU was actually looking at when it was talking about devolution.
Is what Matebeleland experiencing now, 34 years after independence, as a result of leadership failure on behalf of ZAPU?
You would say that if ZAPU was actually sort of had any power in what was actually happening. To a certain extent, perhaps, in that we did have our leaders in what was called the so-called Unity Accord. Now, that our leaders did not raise the pertinent issues properly. You're probably right. We could say the mea culpa. Yes, we have got to look back and say people could have done better. You have actually cited people that were very vocal, and we're very grateful for people like my predecessor, Welshman Mabena, and also Sidney Malunga. Now, yes, we do have people to be vocal, not only about Matebeleland, but people who are vocal about issues that are pertinent to them in all locations in Zimbabwe.
Matebeleland has experienced genocide, and we know that the only sort of research that was carried under very difficult circumstances and which might have conservative figures estimate that more than 20,000 people were killed, but we know the figures could be far much more higher than that. Do you think that the effects of ground and what's happening at the present moment is what really indicates the outcome of such things as poor results at schools and stuff like that? Is that, do you see a link there?
Well, any development in any region will be interlinked with anything like that you refer to, like the absent scourge that happened in Matebeleland. Absolutely, yes. We know exactly the destitution that people were left in. We know exactly what people look at Gukuraundi as something that was actually left there with a time factor there. As one of the people that were directly affected by Gukuraundi, I know that Gukuraundi is still ongoing. Now, the effects of Gukuraundi have been long-term. It is continuing. The fear that was actually sort of inscribed in people's hearts still persists. Yes, certainly. I think that there's no doubt that there is a link between that and the people not actually being able to complain and take to the streets, as people might say, when things like that are done to them. That is the fear that people harbor as a consequence of Gukuraundi.
Now, to go further and really sort of get into depths with this issue, we have sort of economic problems in Matebeleland, probably also linked to the issue of Gukuraundi, or part of that link. So we've got educational issues here, now boiling over and actually showing after so many years. We've got jobs, local investment, creation of jobs in this region. Now, how do ZAPU seek to address the Gukuraundi issue and link it to the outcomes that we need economically, socially, educationally?
I'm glad that I thought that you had left the social, the psychological issues that are there. Now, when people say, how does ZAPU actually intend to do this? It is as if ZAPU as a party is actually hanging there, actually determining the futures of people for them. What ZAPU is saying is, when you have people empowered, people will deal with the issues that affect them directly. It is the people that are going to bring the pressure to say what is pertinent, what we call independence ourselves, actually means dealing with the pain that we feel from Gukuraundi, dealing with the after effects of the genocide that was actually visited upon us. So yes, all those things will be subsumed into what people, and people should not actually sort of take politics, the politics of patronage, where the party knows everything, what people need, is not the politics that we see in ZAPU. It is of an entitlement, of empowerment of people to make decisions on those issues that actually affect their lives.
I think you're just about right, but I think the question here is, how does ZAPU as a party create conditions for people to be able to take ownership over their issues, for them to be, you know, to be at the forefront of resolving them? So what conditions, how does ZAPU facilitate that within such a complex political area or arena, where, you know, if you gather about five of you to discuss about anything without police sanctioning that gathering, you are in trouble?
Indeed, I think that actually I'll visit again. I don't think that I actually dealt with on this platform. I didn't actually deal with. You are actually talking particularly about what ZAPU actually believes about Gukuraundi. Now, my own, and I think I've written a paper on that that where I dismissed the issue of actually sort of saying we'll have a truth and reconciliation council to actually deal with Kukuraundi. My own view is that we need transitional justice. Transitional justice is an umbrella issue where truth and reconciliation would actually be subsumed. The reasons that I'm actually putting for that is if you were to actually sort of look at a judiciary that was going to supervise the truth and reconciliation, the judiciary itself is compromised by being actually part of the instruments of governance that I've indicated with the party that is in government at the moment. Now, how does ZAPU actually sort of break through that? Now, the breakthrough only comes in when people actually sort of have that empowerment to actually grab what is their own. To think of a ZAPU government that goes around dulling and saying this is your authority is no longer an independence that we look, because if it is the power that is given by the people are still dependent on the government to give it to them. As I said, it should be, when resources permit, it should be educating the people to actually demand that which is their own. And together with the view that the devolution as envisioned in ZAPU is to ensure that the provincial governments have got all those powers that you are referring to. And those provincial governments will be accountable to people on the ground. If people on the ground say, this is where we are, the government, the governance in province and the governance in state has got to actually respond positively, because the people will be accountable. And if they do not actually sort of action those things that the people actually wish, then you kick them out.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've dealt much on that. Let's go a bit back. ZAPU is meant to have pulled out of ZANU-PF. Is the Unity Accord dead?
Absolutely. I mean, when we say ZAPU has pulled out, ZAPU decides this way. It is an issue that will be referred to the members in what the supreme governing body of ZAPU, which is Congress. And Congress was unequivocal that the pullout was complete. And whoever it is that has still got resonances, actions of having liaisons with ZANU, will be doing that on an individual, not as part of ZAPU. ZAPU is not there. And what I have also said is that, but that's a separate question, is that one, legalistically, when one looks at what actually happened in 1987, maybe it doesn't have the legal base that actually sort of recognized that Unity Accord is a real Unity Accord. Now, I could deal with that on a separate platform, but only if you were interested, then I'd say why legally it was not binding.
So why was it not binding?
It is not binding because if one looks at the articles of ZAPU as agreed in Cold Comfort in 1963, it was completely, if you open our constitution, it said that now, the name ZAPU would never be changed so long as that party ZAPU subsists. So, in fact, in 1987, the name was changed to ZANU-PF. That meant that that would not be an agreement that was acceptable in our constitution.
So, are you suggesting then that even after the Unity Accord, ZAPU was still existing as a party?
In terms of our constitution, yes.
Right. But you've got Simon Kaya and others in ZANU-PF as representative of ZAPU. And they say that ZAPU is alive, they're in unity government, whatever Dr. Dabenwa and the rest of you are doing is just nothing really. You're not ZAPU.
Well, people are free. This is a freedom that we are after in Zimbabwe, that people can say, can dream any way that they want. For a start, the people that are saying are in ZAPU are not actually ZAPU holding cards. They don't hold the ZAPU cards. For a start, for them to continue like that, ZAPU has got in its constitution that every 5 years there will be a Congress of ZAPU, not a Congress of ZANU. They've never attended any of the congresses. Now, well, to say because there was ZAPU some time ago that they continue to be ZAPU is just, in any legalistic, it's just actually sort of nonsense.
But they are saying, you know, Joshua Nkomo left us in ZANU, and he told us to be part of ZANU-PF. And who are you to say, you know, what Nkomo agreed to? Who are you to actually defy that and come out of ZANU-PF without his blessings?
That is people that talk about ZAPU without any knowledge of what ZAPU actually stands for. ZAPU is not owned by an individual. Illustrious and revered though our S1 leader was, but he hasn't got the dictum, he hasn't got the power to determine. ZAPU is a party whose direction and whose actions are determined by the voice of the people, not the voice of one person.
So from now on, in terms of the state of ZAPU as it is currently, has it got a huge following? Has it got a huge you know, structures across the country?
Well, to answer that very honestly, it is a party in the building. To say that we've got huge is a relative term. It is a party that actually sort of is finding its roots. It's a difficult landscape, and it is made more difficult by the fact that obviously people are seeing the same faces that they saw in ZANU and the same what has changed. But in essence, ZAPU is really undergoing a reasonably good growth spurt. It's certainly, if you talk about membership, as compared to other parties that were there before it, it is actually sort of having a positive growth pattern. Yes.
So what message do you want to communicate to the ZAPU membership and ZAPU followers?
Well, the most important message, first of all, to members is this. ZAPU has been created, if I can put it that way. ZAPU is back as was visioned at the beginning. The people are not automatically going to jump on and come back to where they were all those years ago. They have got to see, we've got to create something that is different. That people can look at and say, if we were to actually leave, abandon the semi-comfortable areas that we are in, what are we going to? There is a lot of weight that is on people's shoulders. If people look at ZAPU and see something no different than what they're seeing elsewhere, where people are actually sort of really intoxicated with actually sort of attaining position of power, people will not be attracted. ZAPU has got a very positive vision. It has got a very positive template that can change the situation of Zimbabwe to the freedom that was sought all those days. But it is incumbent on those that have made the transition to actually sort of live the dream that ZAPU is. To the people out there, we are saying that ZAPU is not, don't come in and say, what is it that the party is going to do for me? Come prepared to be actors in pursuit of the vision of freedom and human rights and the individual rights that actually we want to see in the Constitution. Come, do play your part. Definitely, ZAPU is actually presenting a vision that is totally different than what is on offer at the moment elsewhere.
Dr. Mnguni, it's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We hope to see you some other time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
Bawo chikosomanda, uindonu kwenkabetu. kanti senzele luseni lenkosi awu Thixo somandla awu emhlabeni sibuthwele ubunzima kanti senzele sibuthwele ubunzima bawo Thixo somandla bawo